Hi everyone, welcome back into the classroom. I'm still out here in Sydney, at least for another week or two. I'd like to show you, the last lesson, or we're still working on Cauchois. We showed the global painting and we did a nice darker vase of flowers, multi-stroked, a little bit of wet into wet color. And I want to show you now, again, like I did with the last one, how to go about and apply that. Now, I get a lot of letters from you saying, like I've said before, people wanting to know how to develop their own styles and stuff. And you really have to build a library up here of different styles in which to draw from. It's almost impossible to sit down and just say, I'm going to paint a vase of flowers. Okay? At least it was for me. And now I can do that, but I have so many years of studying the masters that I draw from those and I build upon that. I want to show you how we can take a Cauchois painting and change it up and create some of your own style using Cauchois kind of a template to help you develop your design. Okay, this is how I started doing it about 20 years ago, and I use this with my students today, and in 2 or 3 years they're doing what it took me 20 years to do. So it's a very quick, very fun way to do it. Okay, what I have here, we'll look at this one first, is I'll put this into the classroom right below the video, okay? But this is another, I took this painting, a Cauchois painting, it's a smaller one. It's done to 14 by 18, okay? So I'm gonna paint on a 14 by 18 panel today. But this is a 14 by 18, and it's just a simple container of multi-petal flowers, very similar to what we did in the last lesson. But this time what I'm going to use is I'm going to do this one kind of like it's a template, and what I'm going to do is to replace some of these flowers and some of this design with things that I would like to do. Now, this is a safe thing to do because Cauchois he's passed away a long time ago, and all of his designs, everything he does is in public domain. So you can copy his paintings and sell his paintings and publish his paintings and do anything that you want to do with his paintings because they're all completely in public domain. But what I like to do is sometimes when you're void of ideas of what to do or something like that, you grab one that you like and then you start changing it into what you want to do. The first thing that I want to do is I want to come in here and I want to analyze the light source because we're artists of light, right? So I'm going to come in here. Light is obviously coming in here from the front left, which is one of my favorite sides to take it in. And so it comes up through here. Because these flowers up here are lighter than this one is in slight shadow, and you see this rotating back here, slight shadow. That means the light source is in the upper left quadrant right up here coming down. And you can see that here because this is not lit up right up here to the front, so it's not right directly in the front. It's slightly up because the light is up here. It's a very nice light source. You can see the same type of flower. The value of it goes down, so you can see the light diminishing going here. This will be our cool sides of our colors. These sides will be here, will be warm. Now, one of the problems that a lot of my students have is when we express that light source right up here in the front of this container, and then we start to put it down here at the table, they will go real dark here real fast and stay lighter over here to this side. That's not absolutely correct. Notice on here on this, he just does it wonderfully. His light is diminishing equally on both sides, and that is one thing that is very important. Light does not say I'm coming from the left here, and so I'm going to go shadow to the right side quicker than I do here. Light is even in its movement, and that's what you want to show. So if you're showing a light color here, so let's say here, and it's dropping, say, 2 values here, over that same position up in through here, it should drop about 2 values. Does that make sense? And that's the consistency and the beauty of a beautiful painting. And using something like this as a template can really help you, okay? So I want to show you that. But I'm going to change some of the flowers today. And so I'm going to set this one over here for a reference. This is a painting that I had done here almost 2 years ago, a little over a year and a half ago. It's Eugene Pettit, study of Eugene Pettit. And I put this painting, this particular painting in one of my books, Creative Expressions 3 or something like that. And I showed a lot of Pettit's types of paintings, which I really like. Now, he really had a way of putting in darks and then putting lights. And, you know, we talked about Pettit earlier and banging in that optical flowers. And I love his arrangement of flowers in different multi-petals to more rose shapes, and you know, he just has a wonderful way of putting a composition together. So I'm going to set this one out here today also, just to kind of reference myself from if I want to change a flower up and reach over to grab Pettit or something. The other thing that I did that I showed some of you that came out here to Sydney was like when I take a tray, like I painted, this is a multi-petal tray that I have here, and I paint flowers that are like this. This is the photograph that I use as reference to paint these flowers. Now, I don't go in and try to copy these flowers at all. What I try to do is just to catch the character of the flowers. And so, excuse me, sorry, I got a little frog in my throat there. And so I just try to catch the character of these flowers. So I don't copy. That's the big thing, is I don't copy. You go into copy, you start getting really stiff. Let it become your flower. Let it become your way. But you use good artistic rules of light and intensity and warmth and cool, you know, the temperatures. But you try to, with a series of strokes or movements, you try to catch the character of a flower. You don't try to absolutely copy a flower. But these roses here, they're beautiful roses. These are called Imogen, I-M-O-G-E-N roses. And they're part of they're ones that are created by David Austin. Those of you who study roses like I do, you know David Austin. He creates just magnificent species of flowers. But these are Imogen roses, and they're beautiful, different type of rose. And so, you know, they look, you know, when they look like a version of peony, which, you know, can also look like dahlias, other summer flowers. I mean, there's so many styles that are so close. These are wild roses. These are really pretty to, you know, so I grabbed some different flower shapes, different flowers, different colors, peonies here, different types of flowers. And I never copy them, but I put them all out here as reference, as to something like if I'm going to go in there and maybe I want to change up a Cauchois or something like that, or use his template and then start replacing flowers and doing different things. That's how you start, okay? You need to give yourself a pathway to your creativity. If you try to think about it all at the same time, your mind just gets jumbled and you can't do it. So you have to create what we call a pathway, a journey through your painting. And you do it through, analyzing the light, so we know where our light's going to be. We analyze here we have a core of a design, and then I'm going to slightly change that a little bit as I go through it, maybe doing some flower replacements and stuff like that. And we'll talk about that, what my thought processes are as I'm doing this. And if you do this on, several paintings and several different masters, study them, copy some of their original paintings till you get their idea of their flow, then go in and start replacing and using just their templates and replacing then you'll have an easier time starting to bring out your own creativity and doing your own thing, okay? All right, so here we go. So I have a 14 by 18, this is just a MDF panel here, and I base coated it all medium beige with no sealer or anything. I just base coated it. I'll be using my same palette that I used before. These colors are on the global. This is what we did on the last lesson of the Cauchois, so we'll have that. I'll have out my long brushes. I'm going to be switching some of it over though to the fusion. I do have out my bristles and stuff, and some of my synthetics, but I do like to do my own. When I do my flowers, I like to paint with the fusion. That's my favorite brush. That's what I like to do. And remember, this time we're not copying Cauchois. We're going to let ourselves go. We're going to use him as some templates for some ideas, and we'll go through some placements, okay? So replacement. So let's try it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to come in here and do like the container. And so what I do is I'll take a brush here, and it can be any kind of brush. Usually I do this kind of stuff with a bristle because it breaks the edges a little bit. And I'm just going to do a quick little bit of sketching here. I'll just use some burnt sienna and some water here, and just a bristle so I don't get perfect edges. I don't want to have that. And everything that I'm doing here anyway is going to cover up. But one of the things that's very important is if you want to get casual right from the very beginning, your sketch that you do has to be casual as well, okay? So that helps you. Now this is just a little square. This is one of the things I'm going to help to do this. You look at the container here, okay? Let's analyze this thing. This is just a beautiful little container, a little Chinese influence container here. And we're going to paint it onto the side. So it's a square container here, and we're going to paint a side coming up here to the front here like this. And so to make it really pretty is this line here should sit in parallel with the edge of your frame. And so if you use any kind of square, so for some quick painting and stuff, that can do that. And what I'll do is we look at this, and this, you know, basically you're going to have kind of like a center line. And if you wanted to mark like a center line, exactly what would be, you know, kind of a center line and stuff like that into your painting to kind of help you center it up, you can do that. And then I'm just going to move over here, because this is just a quick reference for me. This is how I do it, is I'll move over just a little bit off of that center line here like this, and I'm going to draw my container line down. I'll move over about an equal amount over here to this side, and I'll draw that particular center line down. Now I think that that's probably just a little bit wide for me, so I'll push that in. Now I can always adjust this slightly with my background and stuff like that. And then I'm going to put the lines in like this onto the point. So this right here will be that actual center line of the container there. Then that'll give you your sides. And when you do it that way, your container is now laying here. It's about center into the painting here. I've got a nice little difference here, so I can get some light up here into the front of my painting, and my sides are parallel here with the edges of the canvas, which will make it look, you know, pretty nice. Now, coming up from the bottom here, so if he's coming up from the bottom, his container is going to go right up about in here, some places where all of his flowers and stuff are going to go, and that gives you a good starting point. You see, and now, you know, I'm not tracing off a pattern or putting that all in here. I'm learning how to go through and doing some sketches. And one of the things that I do in a lot of my paintings, a lot of my DVDs, a lot of my things when I talk about sketching or containers and everything, is like I always tell them, if you're going to get anything correct, get that container correct, because lopsided, wonky, off to one sides and everything, people who are very left-brained like myself, we notice that, and I don't always care for that. So now let's go over and let's look here at his particular painting here. Okay, so I'll step back here with this, and these flowers here, I enjoy Cauchois a lot, but I think his flowers and this one are too big. I would really like to see, let's come down, it's going to come down right to here. So I really would like to see a flower right in this area that is no bigger than that. So his right here is this size. Mine's going to be about 80%, so I'm going to reduce it down just a bit. And he has some other flowers here, maybe 1, 2, 3 here. I kind of like those. This one's sitting slightly in shadow here, so this one will be slightly in shadow here. This one coming out here like this. I like this one up here being slightly turned this way. That's rolling your eye back here. This one's turning your eye back this way just a bit. There's some flowers going on here that kind of fill the composition up. And then some other little light stuff coming back in through here. But that just gives you kind of an idea. We'll have some leaves and stuff that'll come down through here. We'll have a twiggy thing that comes out through here. That just gives me a little bit of an idea of where this composition is going to go. Because the very first thing I want to do is I want to go in there and do the background. But just doing some sketches like this. And one of the things that we talked about early on in the S104 here was the gaze, setting the gaze of the flower. And that's very important. So we know that this, even though his is a multi-petal kind of mum, it has a gaze here heading down this way. And this one is a gaze slightly up here. Now I'm going to change these into kind of like roses here. So I'm going to let the gaze, I want this gaze here, this gaze here. I don't want to put the gaze exactly in the same position. Now he has another one here. I think that these two right here is too much myself. I think that these two right here, it's just a little bit too heavy. So I'm going to let this be a rose, a rose, a rose, and then push one back into shadow right here, maybe come to a leaf. So I'm going to trim it a little bit, not quite to do quite as much. And it's, as you get more, as you get a little better with flowers, I'll put this gaze up this way. As you get a little bit better with flowers, you'll know what you like more than anything else. You can also look through your reference photos and say, well, I like this one. I like the gaze of this flower coming down here like this. So maybe I'll plug this flower right here in that gaze right into there. And maybe I'll turn this and I'll use this one in that particular gaze there. So you see something like this, these imaging and getting some, and there's some great close-up flowers of that. You can see, some of those positions. Here, here, let's take a look at, there was like this one right here. This would be a beautiful flower sitting right down there like that. That would be pretty. This one would make it more closed. That would make a beautiful flower sitting right up there like that. So what we're doing is, we're building on Cauchois. We're using Cauchois kind of a template. We'll do some replacements and fix it all up. This is how you start. This is a great way for you to start. So when someone sits there and tells me, well, I can't copy the masters or anything anymore because I want to do my own thing, you never will really learn. You're going to be copying the masters and using them for inspiration for the rest of your life. I always do. Even though there's times I sit down and just create my own. There are days that I can't do it. I can't get into that creative mood and I got to get a painting done. I sit down, I look through the masters and I'll say, okay, well, I'm going to apply a Petit template to something like this. Does that make sense? And then we get going. Okay, so here I'm going to start this up this way. Now, the first thing that I want to do is just like we did with the last one is I want to come in and I want to work my my background somewhat here. And I had my bigger brush out here. I don't want to use my brand new one. I had another one out here and it just kind of, here it is right here. All right. So what I'm going to do is just come in and start working on some of my background here. I know one thing. I know I want it warm here and I want it cool here. And so I'm just going to set in some nice warmth up here in the front. So I'm working off a medium beige. And, his value up into his front there is really only like a 5 or 6. And I might make it a bit more. I might take some yellow oxide and a little bit of my burnt sienna and some white here. And let's take this up to right around a 7 or so. It's lighter, darker, about a 7, because it'll dry darker here too. So it'll dry down to a 6. Let's put this in right now. A nice warm, nice spot of warmth right in there. And we'll say over to this side just a little more. This will just go here. That'll give us a nice start of our light. And sometimes right in line with my light source, or where my light will be, is I'll just go ahead and put a strike of that light. I like to do that sometimes. Just a quick strike of that, nice and casual. And some of you have written to me and say, you know, casual is where you want to go. And I know, you know, I feel your pain on that. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to, so I don't forget about, see, some of you are writing me things. We are going to have a lot of live classes where I'm going to paint right with you live so you can see how we do it and you can ask questions and stuff like that. I'm waiting till we get back. I thought we could run it here, but we really can't. And I'm waiting till I get back to Pennsylvania. We'll probably do it around the 1st of December. Jeff, thank you very much. Jeff wrote me a big, long letter of nice suggestions and stuff for live classes and things that he's been learning along the way in this class. And I thank you for doing that. And yes, Jeff, I have got that, and I'm looking at that, and we're going to put that all together and everything for you guys. So we're going to be doing that, okay? And we're going to have a lot of fun. And I'm going to invite a couple other classes into some of it. Throughout the winter time, we're going to work on some of this stuff together and get some of you up doing your own things, which is going to be great. So here I have that warmth. Now, one of the things that we always say, that I've always said there too, is carry it. And you can, and this is a nice shiny container here that he will actually, let me shine it over this way just a bit. He will actually cast some of that in. So, you know, even though this is going to be the cool side right there, I'm just going to cast some of that. I like to cast some of that color into a few other little areas, even just lightly. I like to move color. I don't like to isolate color. I like to move color. And this is something I want you to get in hand. Just, even though that's all going to cover up and everything like that, you should always, your eye should always be traveling and moving through color, okay? Now let's before we get into that background there, let's get ourselves a bit of a tiny bit of blue, because this is a real soft blue, warm container here. So a little tiny bit of the phthalo right into this color here, and you'll see you'll get pretty much that color there. I'm just a touch more blue. So to kill that, to warm that and kill that at any time, it's burnt sienna. Burnt sienna really tones that phthalo quite fast, because they're almost pure complements. And we get that color, and that's it right there. So let's just drop that in here, right into this container right here on this side for right now. We'll darken it as we come in and stuff down here, but let's just use some nice casual marks here. Drop that in. Let's cool this down. Tiny bit of the red violet here into some of that burnt sienna and blue here. Let's just cool this right on down here onto this side here, so I can see my warmth and my cool side here, and we'll check that. Yeah, and he's going to have some additional blues and yellows in that as well, but I'm just going to drop that in just a touch more blue. Now I don't want to copy it, but I just, any of these colors will work because I'm already cool, and so any of these colors will work onto that. And I'm going to drag a little bit of that light through there as well. But I'm going to have that bit of a break there. Right up and through here is where that's going to go. I'm going to take some of this, even though we'll put some blues and some shadow tones and stuff like that. Again, always carry your colors through, right? Always carry your colors through. And it would be a great thing to do, even though we'll cover most of this up, just to start out here to the shadow parts and stuff like that, maybe back out through here, carry some of that color. Be loose, be very, very loose. Okay, very loose with your painting here. So there's where my light is going to be. We'll really have that nice spotlight that he puts on the front of that. We'll do that. Some real quick sketching. You know, sometimes I do this right away, sometimes I don't. I just kind of always follow the feeling of what I'm going to do. A little bit of my burnt sienna, a little bit of blue, and a little bit of violet to cool it. You know, I do like to put in the dark tones because of simultaneous contrast. That really helps you, helps your lighter tones appear lighter. So I do like to get some of that in right away. into the painting. We'll put some of that. So we'll put the contact shadow in. We'll drop a little bit of this shadow back here. Isn't that kind of fun? And you see that the light of the dark of the light and dark of the painting start to appear. Let's come back here, push some of that in here. Now I'm going to leave my painting a little bit lighter. He's very dark on this painting, and I don't care for that quite as much. I'm going to lighten mine up a bit. Matter of fact, I'm going to head back to my yellow oxide right in here and put some of those two colors. Remember how the last time we just kind of smashed those through? He does that. He works those backgrounds like that. And so I'm going to leave this one, I want to leave this one slightly lighter. And I'm going to do that. So we'll work that through just a bit, smashing that through. Got that nice warm light starting to cool down a little bit back through here. Now your through light, if you really, he doesn't have much through light here because his overall composition is very dark, but your through light, if you wanted to do that, would be back up here, which is what I'm going to do on this one because I'm going to lighten this one up more than he does. And if you want to paint the darker one, you can certainly do that. You know, it's just don't get into a copy mode. That's the big thing. Don't get into a copy mode. Let's reset that light again right up here. And see, this is where I'll just paint back into that contact shadow there, break that line up just a bit for right now, push some of that light around. Make sure you're moving it about equally back on both sides, right? Because light is even. I mean, it diminishes at the same rate on the light side and on the shadow side. So make sure you diminish it at the same rates that are there. Okay, so we set that in, and I'm going to go ahead and go on up. I love what he did in some of the last painting, which was that burnt sienna green. Not that you always, should always just use that if that's what you like, but I really did enjoy that. I don't want to get this my white too contaminated here yet, so I'm just going to put some off here to the side. But I do love these tones, pine green and burnt sienna together, and then cooling it down a little bit with some red violet over here. Makes beautiful light, cool colors. And of course we'll vary the tone, sometimes more yellow, sometimes maybe just a touch of blue up here into it and stuff. Just makes beautiful, beautiful tones that I like into the painting, and I'm just going to move that around up here real quick here. Boom, and suggestive. And see, this is where I really got, and I like that model brush where these colors come off, and hey, they're a little different. And if you want to put a through light up here, warm it up slightly and lighten it up slightly, and you'll get a through light right up here. But see, I'm working off of that medium beige background again, which I like. And I'll just drop some of that around here. So much easier and faster on this 14 by 18 painting, but it doesn't have quite the visual impact as the bigger one that we did, the 22-28 that we did on the last one. But see, I love that, and I would probably get that just a bit cooler over here. So I don't want to touch into that. I'm just going to put in a little more red violet right into this, right over here. And let's get just a bit more, just a touch of that burnt sienna. Let's just get a little bit more of that violet, that cool violet over here as well, mixing, not over mixing it into, but let's just get some of that worked into that green here, because that'll make beautiful tones into the florals here as well. And I like that. And we will put in a little bit more shadow in there. So I'm going to go a little more red violet, a little more blue and burnt sienna here. Let's get a nice, deeper, shadowy tone that will come in closer to our composition here, because this is kind of our shadow side. And see, those colors just model off of my brush here. I like that. I'm going to work that into some of my composition here. And we'll add a little extender and thin this up. Go back into some of our light. Just work those together. Just work your brush fast and move, move, move. You don't want this to mix and become all one tone at all. So keep your brush just moving so we get this nice modelly background. If you want that through light up there, which is what I want, I'm going to lighten this up just a bit as I get back up here towards that through light into the composition. So that puts a little more shadow. Let's take some of that shadow, which will happen over here onto this side. And let's drop some of that in, but I just picked up a touch more burnt sienna, so it's just a touch warmer. And let's head over towards our greens and maybe a bit of our yellow over here and a bit of our light, a bit of extender into that so I can work this. Let's just move into a slightly lighter, warmer bit over here and work that through right into there, right into our base and our back. He doesn't show a table line or anything on this, which is great. We don't always have to paint with a table line. Okay, so we get that. So we're getting this coloring going around here, maybe a bit darker up and around my composition here. That's good. And since the other side is the through light side, this would be the shadowy side then, because light is coming this way, so it'll go through the composition here and darker right up here. So we'll go darker and a little cooler right up here. And just kind of push that over that background here. And let those two kind of come together. And that's when I just pick up some thin extender with some of the dirty color and let those two just kind of come together, but don't mix them too much. Let those two tones there or that just kind of come together. Now we can establish more light, and I think I will, because it's different than his, establish just a little bit more warmer light right up here, maybe just a touch lighter here. You see, I'm always thinking the light, not just painting. I'm thinking, where's the light, where's heading? So what this up here wants to be is light, but not as light as here. And I usually drop it down about 3 or so, 2 to 3 values through your through light. Depends on how much you do to your flower. So you might adjust this a little bit later. If you decide to lighten up your flowers, then you've got to lighten up your through light. And I like this front here, nice and warm and light. And let's just strike that on. Nice movement here through that. Some of that moving through. And we'll get that in there like that so we get a nice light coming through. Let's restate some of our shadow blue, burnt sienna, and a little bit of our red violet. I can even toss in a touch of green here. And let's get that nice cooler shadow right out here. His is slightly more red, but this is mine. And I kind of like that, but maybe just a bit more red violet into that here. I like the modeling of the colors though. That's what I really like. And sometimes I will do that. I take my finger now and go through that, but we're trying not to touch our finger now, right now, but that's how I do it. If not, I just take a little soft color in my brush, step way back on your brush now so your tip of your brush stays soft, and just go through it just a bit to soften off the edges. But key is there, just a light pressure on your brush and stay way back on your handle so the tip of your brush stays very soft. And let's just slide a bit of that underneath here. There. Stay very casual, and you know sometimes you'll make a mistake with the strike of color or something on there. Just let it sit for right now. Don't try to be perfect. You know, let it sit. If you try to make stuff perfect right now, you'll start to tighten up as being casual. So, you know, there's lots of striking mistakes that I make there. In other words, I put on the wrong color slightly, or I have a wrong angle or something like that to it, you know, and I don't like, I'm just getting that just a little bit too cool up in there, so I got to get them more yellow and stuff and some light. But I'll make these striking, what I call them striking mistakes, and I won't worry too much about them. I can fix them later. They're easier actually to fix after the paint tightens up a bit. But if I start to worry too much about that, then what happens is I'll get tight, and then I won't paint casual, and we want to paint casual. Okay, so that sets up where my through light's going to be. I'm a little cooler over here, a little warmer over here. I like that. I might end up darkening this all down even more. I don't know yet. So, you know, I'm just going to kind of go through the flowers. So he has these kind of orange, toned orange kind of flowers in here, taupe colors and stuff going on through here. I'm going to go with the whites and the imogens and stuff. But before I do that, I better toss in some very toned blue shadowing up here. Blue burnt sienna here. Very toned blue colors. Kind of a shadowing color back up in here. A lot of burnt sienna into this blue. And remember, his blue is a Prussian blue, so a little bit of black in that is okay as well to get over to that Prussian that he does. And let's get some of that right down, because I love how that really plays on this container as well. Get some of that down in there, and then we'll streak it back down here with some of our lighter colors. Just play those colors like that. Just move your brush around, stay back on your handle, and play the colors here. And this, to me, is like, you know, when I started doing this, this was like, that's a little too light, so I'm going to go back down just a bit and find a little bit more grade tone here. That's better. And this is, to me, is like what really became fun about painting, was to be able to just strike color like this and change it up. And, you know, he has a bit of a lighter burnt sienna or some of the table color that we have there, just reflecting back onto this side, which it would be, this would be a reflected color because it's on the shadow side, so it's a reflected color. Should be slightly cool, but it'll feel warmer than the actual shadow side of the container itself. So we'll put some of that in there. I like that. In there, we'll take some of that, carry that color around a bit. Let's carry some of that around. And then let's get over here to our lights. Right up here, let's even warm this just a bit. Get some of that. Now see, you see these different colors and tones. I want to use some different striking here and different colors and tones in there. And you know, I really don't want to get too much of an edge, but an edge will really help pop this forward right there. But when I'm painting like this, I don't like to get too much into the pure details of it yet, because we're still into the blocking in stage of everything here. So let's get a little more burnt sienna, blue kind of thing. There'll be that edge here that's going to define the shadow side here of this container. Here, we'll take that off just a bit, so it's not quite so perfect, because it'll slide down into a light here in just a minute. But this will get some of this dark. We'll pull this down just a bit here. Work that into the container. This is where I used to always have trouble painting containers. Now I love it. I work them many different ways, so you get that bouncing of the light and the shimmer coming through there. You just don't overwork your tone. So you'll see a light side and a shadow side of this container developing here. And some of the reflected warmth of that table there that I put on can come into this there. But it takes a few times through, to really get something in here. It takes a few times through to get this and pull this across a bit. So this container will have a little bit more going on than the last one we did with Cauchois, which is quite pretty. But again, we're not going to copy his here. I don't want to copy his. I want to get some flowers and stuff going on here before I get too far into this, even though it's kind of fun. I love painting containers. Just put a little bounce light through there. But we want to get into some of the flower colors where we get further, but that gets that container a little closer. I love all of the little stuff we're going to be doing in there. I might want to express the light, take some white here, a little bit of yellow, not pure white, take it down to like an 8 or a 9 here, and let's just step way back on our brush and drag this down here like this. Take it off just a bit. Destroy the edge of that. Take some of your shadow and paint into the edge of that just a bit. This is how you do it. You don't want to get a super defined edge there. Here. So we'll do that a couple of times here. This is just our first look at it here. And we'll just drag a bit across here for our light side here, where that might be. There. And here, that's what you do. You just, I overstroke that just a bit. Just take a little mark and take it off, and, just define up, where we're going to have that line, that dividing line there. I'm not going to paint all that detail in there right now. I just want to start getting some of that movement and stuff into that container. He really darkens down. I think I will darken down just a bit, a little blue and burnt sienna. Well, let's cool this because it's going to the back, but the blue will also make it feel cooler. This will help us if we get this darker down through here. This will help us advance our flowers. So I am going to put a little bit more shadow tone right back down in here. But I'm using the smaller brush. That's not really a great idea because it gives you a lot of movement out here. And we don't want to get too much movement into this because then it competes with our flowers. That's why I like to use the 3/4 inch brush. Right now I'm using a 10 Fusion flat. But you can use there I want to touch it. I need to go to my bigger brush. I don't like to have too much movement in that because that will just take away from our flowers. Till we get our flowers on, then we can decide. But that helps us a lot right over there for that. Will really pop this dark deep, and because it's in shadow, we'll push this in like this up and around. That'll help this forward center of interest flower really pop off there, which is what we're going to do. Okay, so now if I want to do a version, I think, of the image in roses, not exactly some of Pettit's influence and stuff here. I'm going to take some yellow here first, some yellow oxide, and just let it work inside of that color there at the same time, and start to find the size of the flower that I want. If I'm going to get brighter at all, I would keep the brightness here, get a little bit more yellow. If I'm going to keep it brighter, I would keep it up onto this side because this is the light side, the light strike side, and let it tone down, gray down, and hit over here onto the composition on that side. Does that make sense? Always, even when you're starting there and you're working with intensities or you're putting a color on, always keep in mind where your light is, because that's your map. That's where it's telling you what to paint, how to paint. Okay, fresh paper towel. All right, so we were going to trim some of this. We're going to put another yellow right up in here. Let's start up here by our light. Okay, and then let's let it tone down, even add a little bit of this toned color to it. Let that tone down here a bit right over here. Okay, now let's gray that down, cool that yellow down just a bit. Let's just go over here and add a little bit of our blue and a little bit of the violet here. Tiny, tiny, tiny bit of that. And that just kind of grays and cools that right on down. A little bit more. Touch more. Even hit a little sienna into that too. Matter of fact, sienna might be a good one to kind of start out with. But it'll cool that down there, darken it down just a bit. For this one, we want to kind of push into shadow just a bit here. So there'll be one up there. There's my habit of touching that when I want to soften, and I really gotta. He doesn't touch it with his hands and stuff, not as much as some of the other impressionists and stuff do. So I have that one there and that one there. I might want to, you know, he's got these beautiful red expressed over there, which is kind of what I want to do. But I also want to carry color, so maybe I'm going to express a little toned, cooler yellow out over here. Remember, move your colors, right? And, you know, you can express something like that. You can just drag a little bit of that around your composition some places. Just make that strike, because that little, it carries that tone down. That's the difference between decorative painting and the fine arts, is they carry those tones. We make those tones, you know, and we carry those tones. We move those tones. We see those things moving through our paintings and stuff. So that's what we like to do. I'm going to brighten back up just a bit more. And let's come up here. We'll turn this one. We'll do the Imogen roses. Maybe we'll do a couple pinks or those reds. I like those reds in there. So I'm going to take some burnt sienna and some red. And we painted a lot of those in the last one, which might be kind of nice to add a few of those in there. That's a bit warm, so I'm going to cool that down just a touch here. Let's cool that down. But look how it sparks. How that color kind of sparks. Move your brush, move your brush, move your brush. The color kind of sparks. He has a softer one. We can just thin this out, maybe add a bit of our background tones into this to gray this down. See? Gray it down. Some of your blue, some of your shadow tones over here. And let's just push a softer version of that right back here on the other side of the container. That's kind of pretty, so it'll sit there. And that'll push this edge of the container a little forward. Strike little areas of that tone. You know, let's even put some of that tone over here towards our... And we could use that actually, if we want, you know, we're not going to paint perfect Imogen roses. We could use that like as a center of these roses as well, which would carry your color around, see? And it'll mark and carry that color. So, you know, sometimes I'll express a flower like that and then decide, okay, I got to carry that color. So sometimes I'll cool half the side of a flower. So like a white flower isn't always just white. You can have some yellow in it. It can have some reds in it, some violets and stuff. And sometimes I'll do like this. I'll take the darker, you know, tone of one and push it into the center to help that flower gaze. Now, I don't have to keep all of that on there. You know, I'll paint some of that out, but that just, and it also helps move that color. You know, and maybe I want to have some real soft little versions of that somewhere back here. Maybe there's something back here to fill up the shapes of my container, the overall bouquet. Now, you don't want to go exactly kind of like what's happening here with me. I don't want to make it exact. I want to take it off shape just a bit here. In other words, so I don't have the same amount of space all the way around. That's a left brain thing that I do quite a bit. So, you know, I don't want to do that. But I want to put some touches of this around. Maybe some touches of some of that toned yellow back through there. Yellows to whites. We're going to have some whitish kind of colors back there. So we can take, the other thing is, see, you got this container, right? And that's even though that's a container, not a flower, that's a color. And you should move that color through. So let's just move that through. And now see, as I put that color up in here, and this could be, oh God, Dave, don't touch it. This could be, get these habits, you know. I mean, that's where I like to do, that's what I like to do. I like to really get free with the Cauchois like this and do this, but I do that a lot in this last couple years. I've been using my hands a lot, and I'm trying to get away from it a little bit just to get a slightly different look. That's why I'm stopping myself all the time. But let's just take that container color and push it around into some other little flowers, and he has these little white ones up here that are really kind of nice. Here, little white buds, you know, and you know, it's like the thing that I said earlier on in the early lessons before we got into the big paintings. You know, good floralists or floral painters, like botanical painters, they always believed in painting the, the flowers into their to the three things: as the adult, the juvenile, and the bud. And good compositions will always have those types of things. But see, now I'm moving that white around this painting here, Okay, and that's going to be good. So you can see where we're taking inspiration from, but it's getting its own look. Let's take a bit of cool green, pine green, and some red violet. And that's the other thing that I like to do is set up in some of those real dark separation greens in here that are some of your darker leaf shapes that help you separate out of your container. And you know, I like to paint those a little bit into the shapes of the flower. So I might put a leaf out here. He doesn't have one. I might put one here. And this helps you separate your flowers. Push one back, set one forward, and so on and so forth. So, and they give up good dark contrast as well. Here, we'll warm up a bit. And all this I can change. Let's just warm this up a bit, get a little bit more toned here with this. Find some nice little greens here. I'll separate that. And I'm just looking for some color moving through, some light and dark color right now. I'll set the lights on it a little bit more in just a bit, but just a little touches of these tones in here. See, they don't have to be complete leaf shapes. They can be just touches. We'll paint leaves, but you're looking for the movement of the tone, and that is what makes it pretty. And you might want to cool this down, a little bit of that red violet, a little bit more of that into this as you come back down over here, down over this side a bit, maybe some out here. Just real casual like that. And you're just moving that color. All right. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to rinse that green out of my brush because I'm going to go to a yellow here as we start to work some of our Imogen roses here. I'm going to take some Hansa and some yellow oxide here, and let's push that right up into where we want our real flowers really to push forward here. Let's push some of that in there. See where I'm just pushing that in there. Okay. And again, I have my monitor set, so when I'm looking at that, I'm looking at one here that's about 6 feet, and I'm looking at that right there, which is that camera back there, and looking at the visual impact in it. So when you're up close like this, you're seeing a heck of a lot more into it than what you're seeing on the actual camera. You're seeing a lot more brush stroke movement on mine than what you're seeing in the actual camera there, because the camera's looking at it from about, gives it an optical difference of about 6 feet. So you can have a little bit more movement than what you actually see going on in mine. Some of you are going, well, you really need to blend that out a little bit more. No, it's the movement. It's that movement that gives the interest to that. Okay? All right, so let's go in here to our container colors. Let me add a little bit of extender and loosen this up just a bit in here. Some of these yellows and grays and these blues and stuff going here, and that's tacked just a bit, so I'll just take a little bit of blue, mix up a little extender with this, gray this up. These container colors will make beautiful undertone whites for our roses here. We want to paint a rose here with the outside petals coming in. Here, pull in a bit, in and out like this. But we've got to keep Cauchois. We've got to keep those strokey movements of Cauchois here. So we'll paint it a little different than I've done before. We'll just catch the feeling of that going around. So just catch that rose shape going around. A little heavier now. See, a little bit more of an edge, a little bit more of a defined petal over here towards this side, which is your light side. And then we want this to fade away and get lost edges and stuff over here onto this side. Does that make sense? Because this is the center of our composition where our eyes are going to move through here, just like that. Let's take some of that tone. Get a little extender in that. Make sure it's kind of loose, kind of soupy, just a little bit, because that'll help you get some transparency. So this one we want turned down. So we'll give a little bit more of an edge here so it sits on top of that one. The big edges of the rose are going to be here. Paint in and out. I'll just whisper real light just the movement of these petals right out through here like this. Okay. And maybe one out here like that. That kind of helps turn the flower. So longer right out through here helps that flower turn down. Let's wipe our brush. Let's pick up a bit of our yellow, maybe a touch of red right down here. Soften that into our brush and come right along those edges just a bit. Just touch that color along those edges, right where it changes from white to yellow, just to incorporate those colors just a bit. We don't want to blend those colors, and we want to incorporate those colors. We can take some of this light. You know, this is where I like to do little stroking, or, you know, you stare at the Imogen roses there for a while. You'll see they're made up of like little strokes and stuff. Now I just want to catch, I got that a little stiff there, so I'm going to back it back out with some of my red and some of my yellow here. And I will tend to do this several times through the painting, and this is what gives such beautiful tones to your roses and stuff here, building up a little more color, a little more texture. If you want to do a more defined, now we're not copying the Imogen roses because they don't have red centers like that. So we're just using them. They have kind of a burnt sienna type of center here. We're just using them for some inspiration. Don't get too much into the copy of it there. Push that color around, soften that around a bit. There, like that. Let's push some of that back around up over here. Some of that burnt sienna and yellow. It's a warm color, so you don't want to go too much into that cool side unless you have some red violet in it, right? Let's get just a little deeper, a little more burnt sienna, maybe a touch of violet here. Let's push that center into that one a bit more. Bit of that color coming right out over there. That's giving some character, see, to that flower. And now what we'll do is we'll pick up more white. We'll come right down here. This will lighten up some of that color. We'll let a little bit of yellow hit into that color now. That'll keep it warm. And I'll model it on my brush here like this. And pick that up. Pick up that nice, you know, kind of texturized color there. And we'll use that to kind of set in another petal. Sometimes I pull out just a bit like that. Tap that around a bit. There. Let's go just a touch lighter there. There. Model that into your brush. Get some of that all modeled around. You got to imagine the little petals here around the top. Here, just kind of stroke some around here. Give just, you paint the movement. When you're back here, just paint the movement. Don't paint petals, because that will bring it forward. Just paint the movement of the rose there. Okay, just paint the movement of the flower, just like what Cauchois does. He doesn't always paint. Now that's a little stiff over there. So I just take my softer color and push right through it, see? And push it back. Some of my more toned, darker color here, because we're heading towards our white, and I'm not painting anywhere near white yet, so we've got a ways to go here. There we go. Just paint some nice movement of those. And I may want to come out and put, this is what I like to do on Imogen roses and stuff, is put little light tips onto those. You know, little edges there. That just gives a little bit more to the flower itself. I'll get some lighter colors here right up into the front and touch some lights right up here into the front here. Some of that around there. It's kind of pretty here. Sometimes, you know, and you look at it, okay, so he's got these real white ones here. We've changed those up into there, but we do want to keep some of that nice light shadow. So I can pick up a little bit more of my shadow whites and come back through and lift off some of the extra little bit of white that I might not need into that flower. And, you know, use little corners, edges, corners, little bits of your brush here. I like to paint with a bigger brush and use the corners because that gives me, you know, shapes that, you know, if I use a small brush, I always get kind of the same shape. But if I use the corner of a larger brush, I don't always get it that way. I get some different shapes in there. Let's take some yellows and let's just move right down into our center there a bit more. And take out some of that red contrast right in there. And it makes a pretty little flower there. We can get some more whites into that. There. Let's get a nice strike of textured white. I'll come down here, pick up. This is just, get way back on your brush and put some texture strokes right in there. Some texture, lots of paint. That's Pettit, where he paints that, lots and lots of paint. And one of the things that we can do is, you know, take any of your, like your violets, if you want to get a little bit more tone in there, take like some violets and some white here, make a real light kind of violety color, and push that into the flower a bit, especially onto the shadow side. That makes a real pretty color. See, you get that into that. It's real pretty. And nice variation. Let's go back up. Let's just take some of that violet here and some yellows and just model that all together. So each of your flowers can be slightly different here. Let's get some of that light right out here onto this one. Get some of those edges right in there like that. And maybe a bit of that violet heading down here to that shadow side there. That's kind of pretty. We'll get some more light. Just work some of this light right up in here by these edges. Kind of paint almost like the bowl of the flower there. And soft. Load in some yellow to incorporate anything. Push back. You know, you can push more yellow in there. You can push a... We can take a little brighter dose of Hansa right on our light source side, right in there. That helps a bit with some of that. Make sure you step back. So every time you see me going, you know, my eyes travel over to look at that monitor, you should be stepping back, right? Stepping back away from your canvas and taking a look at it, away from your board, taking a look at it to see if you're getting that look. Let's get texture right up into the front up here. Small little jabs. And remember, you're making marks, right? You're making marks painting a flower this way. Okay. A few coming out around the sides here, maybe. Maybe a few little, that's a little too light. Let's get some violet into that. Maybe even a little green. Tone it down a little, not quite as bright. Let's work just a little tiny bit of yellow in there. And if you take out too much, then you just come back with your burnt sienna and stuff again and put it back in. Now see, this is where I kind of look to see that center. Now I can push in a little burnt sienna, a little bit of my, tiny bit of my red violet here. Put that back into the corner of my brush and just start adding some of that back out until I, you know, get some of the contrast that I want to see in that flower right there like that. So I've moved it out here. How much do I want to see within that flower here? And so you see it's not quite as heavy as it was before. It's a little lighter, a little more airy in there. I've just painted some of that out. But see, this also coming in here is also contrast. So leaving little marks of contrast, which is something that Pettit does. See, Pettit comes in and leaves little marks of contrast and stuff going on in there, which is wonderful, okay? Which is, you just do that. So using the corner of a big brush is wonderful because it doesn't make exactly the same mark every time. If you go to a smaller brush, it'll make the same mark every time, all right? Okay. So that gets like two major flowers there. Let's push the shadow almost like a bud of one back down in here. We've got to cool it down. Got to get some of our other tones in here, some of our blues and stuff going on here. This is where I constantly kind of feed the colors on my palette here with a little bit of extender so they don't dry up too much here. And if they do, we just go back into tone painting. But let's get this in here. This one's going to sit mostly down in shadow. They sit very formal right here. I'm going to put one in there. This is not exactly like, you know, Cauchois' setup, but you see we've pulled a lot from Cauchois on this painting. But we don't have to pull it all. So let's just do this one right here, sitting back like that. Push that color back in there. Let's put a bit of yellow in there. Let's probably maybe stay away from the Hansa because we're sitting in darker. Push a little bit of that color in there like that. And maybe just the softer light tones here. Coming around the building up like the bowl of the flower here a little bit like that. Maybe, and we could go a little lighter, maybe edge like this, so these two flowers are kind of overlapping each other a bit. There we go, like that, see? And just push a little bit of light around here for some movement and get out of there. We don't want to do too much to that. This is just a color, what I call a color carrier, a flower that is just carrying some of the colors, not doing a lot of the decorative part of it. Now in here, do we want to go, oh, actually what we should do, so we imagine these guys up here, these other ones are going to be buds really of these kind of Imogen type flowers. They're not exactly Imogen roses. We've just taken some creative license with the Imogen here, which is fun. This is what I do. It's a flower. It's a flower. And let's kind of paint kind of like a bud shape of these here. A little heavier there. That's a little too much, I think, but I'll take it down in just a minute. Here. And just kind of toned and cooler, and then we'll put a bit of light right onto our light source here. And again, like I'm a little heavy there, and so I'll take some of my yellow, some of my green, some of my violet, some of my colors pushed together there, and just paint some of that out with some of the other colors that are around it there, so it's not quite so big here. And that's where these things get really pretty. You get these overlying strokes and tones. Very much Petit, very much Cauchois here. And I just love them like that. That's, you know, you get these tones just overlapping each other here. And it's so casual. It's so pretty, and it's different. And that's the whole thing is, you know, my entire artistic career also, you know, is I'm in search of different things, you know, always painting a little different. So I don't buttonhole myself into painting just one way. Just light little pressure way back on your brush here. Just pushing in a little bit of the light there, and that'll turn those into buds, you know, then, and you can open a petal of one up here a bit. Let's give it just a tiny splash of yellow onto that side. Then that gives a little more identifiable fact, a little more identifiable bit of the flower itself right there like that. It's about to open up there. That's kind of pretty. And I so much more like painting like this than I do absolutely copying, or not, I don't copy anymore, but you know, like Cauchois thing, I like to take reference from them and just kind of do my way, do my thing here. And I come back, just like I say in so many other things, revisit your center of interest after you've worked some of those other flowers and stuff. Revisit your center of interest, some of your center flowers here with some lights, some highlights, some edges and stuff like that. And get some of that moving around here. Here like that till you you know, so you get some of that beautiful working of that. Now, you know, it's like, I like everything here. I think on this side, that's a little bit too much movement right out here. So I'm going to put a little soft burnt sienna and yellow into my brush here. A little more burnt sienna. And just lightly come over that and push some of that back into its yellow color there. See how that softens that out and it puts the movement further up to this side. So you just step way back onto your brush. It's one of the reasons why you have long handled brushes. You get back and the movement is not enough to disturb the paint that's really underneath there. And that's one reason why I like the acrylics. I can let that kind of tack and get sticky and go back and do that. Or glaze it. Go to a glazing technique as well. One reason why I just love the painting with the acrylics rather than the years I painted with oils. You know, I mean, you could disturb it so easy in oils. In acrylics, all you got to do is just let it tack up a bit. Let's put just a couple more marks of brighter yellow, white right up here in the front. That just moves that flower. Just see how it just changes the flower a bit. You put some, that's petted, and Cauchois, but you can put some of those marks out there. See, petted would come in and leave a mark like that would like indicate like a petal, but it's just a little bit, and it's a lighter mark sitting on top of a more tone. Probably 2 to 3 values, you know, of difference, and he does that a lot on his paintings and stuff. So he would come out right out here and just go bang like that with a little mark, which would give you the impression of another layer of a petal without having the white stroke there. So it keeps the design more light and more airy, more fluffy here. Let's just push this right up around like that. Don't want to get too much light there, but that's kind of following my path of light okay. So I'm all right. I probably won't do any more than that. There, let's go play with our reds. Now, do we want to do the mum type flower here that he does? Let's take a little bit of our quinacridone with this red. Or do we want to make them a little bit more multi-petal? Since we've done the reds last time, more of more of the mum type of shape. I'm going to put a little yellow oxide in this, reds and stuff here. Get this maybe. I don't want this too bright. I want it red, but not too bright. Here we go. And not too red. Let's go with just a bit more multi-petaled. So we'll instead of doing lots of little strokes, we'll widen them out. Use more of the flat of your brush there. Widen those out a bit here. And so some of these, as they get out here, you just need to do a few of them. And then the rest of them, you can just do strokes, just like he does with the rest. But a few of them will give you the impression of a multi-petal type flower, see? Now let's express our light source slightly lighter onto that. Slightly lighter, so let's express a lighter stroke here. Boom. Little touches here onto that. We'll put just a bit right here. Now that we're passing the ellipse of the light, we'll let that just fade away. We'll put just a touch of the lighter up here, maybe right up there. That's where the light's going to go through, so you see it going cooler. So we need to get some cool colors into that as well. Let's get this back down into some of our red violets here. And let's just get that red violet, pretty red violet strokes and touches down here. Heading down here towards our shadows. Some of that into the back here. So I'm always, again, watching my light. I like that path of light right through there. Take some of that orangey red, violet-y kind of color there. Let's push a bit of that in. And see, I always push in, and this is the way I do it. I like to do it. I push in too much, and then I'll take it back out softer with some light or something else here. Take some of that back out. But I do it so that I can get that color moved. I don't like to isolate that color, so it really needs to come in right out here someplace. And then I'll start to soften it in here. Just get some movement in there with that. That looks pretty good. Let's rinse that out of the brush for a second. And if it gets too bright on you, and that's just a touch, tiny bit, I just put in a lighter or a green color, grade green, into your brush and come back through to it. See how it takes it out? But it still has the tone in there. That's how I like to do it. So I push just a little bit of that in there. And if I need to, I'll set that petal back up on top of that. And now I've got some of that tone, see, just lightly carrying across right over to there. That's how I like to do that. Painting back and forth with your edges like that, that is really, quote unquote, what an artist would do, is to take that kind of time to paint something out a bit, put a tone in, and then work it back out again. And it just adds magic to your paintings. It really does. Let's put some of that orangey tone right up here. Let's put like a blossom, maybe one or two. Maybe there's another one right back here carrying through the painting. It won't be as light. So let's get some of that darker tone in there, some of that cool tone. Doesn't need to be too much. Maybe just a quick little indication of the light hitting one side of them right up here. Light coming through there like that. And you just leave those quick little touches that happen. And those only happen for me, those quick little touches that make it look like a flower and stuff, if I paint with a certain amount of speed. I'm always painting the movement, not the petal. And this, the movement of your brush, and just, you know, a quick dab and lift off, you know, into that movement of that petal. Just dab it in there and move off, you know, boom, boom, boom. And that will give the movement of that petal, and what happens with the color happens with the color. But if you go back and back and back and back, which, you know, there's a thing, and what's the difference? It's confidence, right? We got to build this confidence inside ourselves to leave it, okay? Because to you, and I've said this 100 times so far in this, to you it will always look wrong. To me it looks wrong, but I have the confidence to just leave it. I know it's close to what I was envisioning in my mind, and I'll leave it. If I paint it more, I'll stiffen it. If I just leave it, the viewer has no idea what was in my mind. They just think that looks pretty good. It looks like, you know, hey, that's got a good little edge right there. It's got a cool side, and that's got a nice little warm side. I could add a quick little touch or two of some cool color here, especially if I want to pop that red flower or this white flower forward, and just push that out there like that, and that does its job. You know, it's pushed the flower forward, and it does its job, you know. So, but if I sit there and play and play and play with it, it gets stiff and it never gets to where I want it to go. So let's tone this down, cool this down, add a little green to this, add a little more violet to this. Let's get this very soft back here. And let's push a couple of little indications of some outer flowers there. And, you know, there's a bit of movement back there. So I'll just take some of my light, kind of tan, a little green here. Doesn't have to be the same color, and I'll just work that right into that edges of that right back there, and just soften that back. Let's just soften some of that back right back in there. Move some of the color around so that there we go. Just got a little bit of that color moved around. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now I'm painting most of this with a 10, which is what I like to do. It's one of my, but you know, it's like also though, you should change. You should try changing and stuff. Now, I know that one of my darkest, coolest green contrasting colors is my pine green and my red violet. I love that. If you really, really want a lot more contrast, phthalo green blue and red violet is one of the darkest. It's a pure, almost black cold, but I'm going to push that right in here right now. Right into that area there, and you'll see that really gives contrast right here to my compositions. I can drop some right in here. This is that shadow contrast that we were building on there. I'm going to drop some right into there. Let's go touch more green here so it's not quite so much. Push that back since this is onto the shadow side. You know, I can add little flicks, little touches of it to you know, separate and push more contrast in between my flowers, you know, that's up to you how much more you do inside of that there. Change the color up, add a little bit of yellow to it, but it's still slightly cool. Let's get some of that in. And we can do a little negative painting out here to push some of those edges of these. See, if I do a little negative painting like right around here, right up into that flower shape a bit there, it pushes that flower forward, and that works. Let's push a little bit here, push a little bit out there like that. I like that nice more casual look there. Let's push just a bit back up here, separate that flower out. It's looking pretty good. We can use that for, you could even use burnt sienna and stuff, but you can put in a few softer stem movements here. Maybe there's a, you can soften that out with a little bit of your red right into that. There, break that line up a bit. Let's just drop some of that in here. Some of that movement out. And you would put some, of course, some highlights and stuff like that with that as well. We've got a bit of a, let's leave this one slightly more yellow back here. I have a little dirty green in my brush. That looks pretty awesome, actually. And then we'll get a touch light, not quite as light. Let's even put a little red into that. Some of my green and my red violet here, so it cools down just a bit. More of a gray, toned gray, but big color there is the red violet, so it cools down a bit. That'll be a back rose back there. Now we're watching that. You're stepping back and you're looking now. I don't want to go as light as warm. See that yellow that's in there? I don't want to go as light and warm. So I'll keep it a little cooler and not quite as light. And we'll build the front of that. Maybe build a reaching petal out of that right there. So that just takes you out that way a bit. And we'll let some of that sit back behind there. And it's just, you know, and try some different things here. Let's push a little bit of that red into that. Let that sit back behind there a bit. I can bring that flower out just a touch more. Maybe a bit of yellow, just a little bit. Here. That's kind of pretty. It's kind of like one that is not opening, you know, is not opened up completely. I'm kind of visualizing a little bit of a bud shape, maybe a bit of a flower or so there, shape to that. And define this bud shape just a bit more here. Bit of yellow. But you would, you know, like everything, you wouldn't make it quite as yellow as what's going on over there. Checking that out there, yeah, I think I could have a little bit more of a rounding stroke right up here to round that around. Yeah, that worked. And let's just put a real soft movement. It might be a bit light, so let's darken that down just a bit. And really, you can get it darker, cooler with some of your green and your red violet here. Make sure you add some extender to that. But see, it gives that beautiful grayed tone to that. Let's just push that one real soft back in there. And maybe just a tiny touch of the yellows into that. So it carries that yellow over there. It might have just take a tiny bit of the burnt sienna so it doesn't have much power. Just a tiny bit on the corner of your brush. Drop that through. And maybe just an edge of a petal here. Can make that look just like a soft one over there. You don't want to do too much over there, because if you start to build this one too much and start focusing in on this flower, what you'll do is you'll flatten your composition. So you don't want to do too much of that going on there. Okay. So I can develop some more leaves in here. I like the red ones. I like those a lot. Maybe a cooler little stroke right up over here towards the bottom. Those, I can develop the leaves a little more. We can, but we have enough on there. We can want to return to the container now also. And matter of fact, let's do that. Let's first return to the container with our toned. We're going to take our, now remember he uses Prussian here, and I like some of that decoration, that Chinese decoration he has on this. So it's Prussian, it's blue and black here. And then I'm going to tone it a little bit more with some burnt sienna here. So it's real toned. And I want to just pull down. And you know, this would be a wonderful color also, if you put it in there, to touch through some of your deep tones in the painting as well. In here, little bits of it. Here, look at how it just pops that floral, just boom, out it goes. We might need to soften some of that in there, because that's a lot of contrast. But you know, he gets very much a dry brush, just dragging that down like that to the sides. And I might soften that out just a bit here. Gray soften. And pull that down. You work your lights back and forth. He likes this draggy bit of that pulling down like that. And that is kind of nice. And so it's kind of dry. So I just added a little extender to make it kind of thin. But then I'll dry it. I'll drag it here until I start to see it drag on my palette. Do you see that? Then I know I can get that look pretty easy there. Just dragging what we call the granulated look that he has there on that, which is, I kind of like that. And also he has kind of a glazed look, which is just a little thinner here. There like that. And use our brush with some of that light color in there to soften that movement just a bit. There we go. That just softens that out a bit, so you get some of that in there. I like that. I'm going to follow. Now I'm not going to worry about copying it exactly, but I do like some of this decoration and stuff that he has there. And I think that is really kind of nice. And so, you know, when you get there and you readjust a line like that, sometimes, I'm going to clean that blue out of my brush for a second. Sometimes I just let that happen. And, you know, I know that's happened like that. And I come down like this and I paint down into that line or into the line this way. And that gives you this beautiful, very casual, you know, some of you, like I say, write to me and say, you really want to get casual. That's how you get casual. You let those lines happen like that, you know. He's got splotches of, you know, burnt sienna and stuff like that. That's all along in through here, the bottom of his vase and stuff in through here, and splotches of his palette colors that are pulling down into that. And, you know, and that's the kind of stuff you just want to catch the feeling of it. You can't copy it. It's impossible. But we'll just catch the feeling of some of that there. And, you know, he's got this reverse splotch right in here, which I'm not going to put in, but you can see it right here. You can see that splotch and stuff there. That's a you know, a shine coming in from the other side. I'm not going to put that in. I might put it in at a lower value. I think it's a bit much here, but I'm just going to drag some of this light through there like that. I kind of like that. And again, revisit some of your blue grays and other tones in there. That's where they get pretty. You know, look at this compared to your vase. To your flowers. You don't want it. I'm going to have mine a little bit lighter than he does. Well, my overall painting's a little bit lighter than his. And so are my flowers, basically. And so I'm just going to let that happen. Let's just drop some of that. So if you want to glaze, you loosen it up. If you want that dry brush, then you drag it on your palette a little bit, and it will it'll drag for you and give you that draggy look, which is really pretty as well. I just like that back and forth like that. That's kind of pretty in there. And then all this little detail that's on here, and that's my dog barking there. What you got, huh? All this little detail that have here. Now you could use like a little liner brush. I don't like to do that. I'm going to use a little synthetic flat. This isn't a fusion. It's one of the little synthetics here. And, you know, just lightly do some scrolling type work there. And step way back onto my brush like this and do a little bit of that Chinese acanthus decoration here. And that's too, I don't want to touch that, but get something that's a little bit off, then you just tap through it, see, with that light color and take that off, and it gets that nice little relaxed edges that are wonderful. Some darker decorations, touches like right in there, something going on. Darker little touches. So you do it kind of drag brush and draggy, then add a few little darker drags here. Then you can push some, not perfect, but some very casual cross-hatching through, which is kind of pretty. A couple going back the other way, just real light edging and stuff there. That's kind of pretty. And you know, you can put in, he has just the idea of some other stuff, and his is a little softer than mine is, but that's okay. Like something else is going on there. Maybe there's something going on there. Just little indications, you know, of this. You know, I've painted it before. I've done a couple. I did it in a DVD where I did this Chinese vase, Cauchois, and did a real detailed painting on the Chinese part of it, I mean on the vase of a scene. And I enjoyed it, but I always thought that that was just too much for the painting, for the casualness of the painting. I always thought it was a bit much for that. So let that tack here for just a second. And I'm just going to glaze down a little more shadow over that, push that back just a bit. A little burnt sienna, some of that. That'll push that shadow back in there. I'm going to push that shadow on this side here just a bit more. There. Really want to, and that's working pretty good there. Really want to get that light coming up here into the front. So now I have that. So I have that in there like that. Now I'll come in and let's pick up a bit more of our light white. Tap through that. Even tap through some of this. You know, even though he doesn't have it there, I like to tap through and give a bit of a shine back into some of that, especially if I'm coming on the light side. He put a lighter shine, then I'm just going to put a low light shine. So it's not going to be as light right in here. Just like that. Just a little bit of that. That will give you the idea that that's light's ricocheting around in there, but too much. Let's go back. And let's revisit some yellow and some light right into all these lovely mottled colors, a little red and stuff. And I want to work those red flowers again as well. But let's just come right in here and set that light right in here. Really nice. There. where I like that light. Take some yellow and let that get in, get some of this dirty burnt sienna stuff into that as well. I like to do this kind of stuff where I just take it back and forth several times through the light just to get this nice variation of tone through here. So a little bit of that burnt sienna. See, it's picking up a bit of that other type of flowers right down there. That's working pretty well. Of course, his is quite a bit darker, and you can do that as well. You know, it's yours. You're finding your way, right? Just make sure you keep your light kind of suggestive even across here. Let's just, whoops, a little too light on the handle there of the brush. Move that through there like that. And I'll go back to my bigger brush as I work some of that back. And you have to, you know, he's always really good at putting in little flowers and little stuff that's fallen off of his flowers and stuff. We might do that as well. Little petals. That just adds stuff to the design. That's just nice. Here. But you know what? We're hour and 30 minutes into the painting. That's not bad, you know, for a little painting like this to paint it that quick. Now this is the thing, you're not going to be able to paint it that quick, you know, until I've painted Cauchois for a long time, so there's a certain amount of confidence that comes with it. You do this like at least five or six more paintings, you'll get more confidence, you'll work faster, and you know, you should set your goal of painting it faster. And like I said before, why? Because that keeps you from playing in it. You just let certain things go, and it keeps you from playing in it. And that's where our ultimate goal is, to keep from playing in it. And our whole journey, and hopefully you'll join me in all different kinds of other journeys. But you know, our whole journey is to paint all different kinds of masters, all different kinds of ways. And I like to just say, okay, well, you know, let's look at how we would change them up to do something today. You know, how would you change that up a bit? You know, I like that little violety stroke right there. We had something similar to that earlier here. I'll just add a touch more right in there like that. I like those kinds of touches of coming back through like this into the painting and moving some of that around. And let's grab some of this other tone and just kind of work these tones and movement back in through here. This is where I think you get so much of your painting, so much. And see, that gives kind of a nice light pass there. We'll adjust this just a bit, but kind of a nice little path of light right there going through. And if we're going to leave it that much light to dark, we should probably put a little bit of that back up here. Just kind of quickly model that around. Some of this, oh, don't touch that, Dave. See, that little habit wants to come back. Yeah, I love it. We'll just let that sit softly back up there. That's picking up a little shine from the thing. It's not really as light as you're seeing it there. It's got a shine onto it. That looks pretty good there. I could have that, I could kick that front shadow here just a touch darker right here. Let's get a nice bluish gray there right onto that. That works pretty nice there on that one. Now let's work on some centers and a little bit more red, softer reds further out into the design. Let's just make sure our colors carry there enough. I was questioning that, and there's you know, if you're looking at something starting to question it, that means it is wrong and you should fix it. So I don't like this real quick stopping right there. I want to take that light back out this side a little bit more. And so I was starting to question it, and that just tells me if I'm questioning, I know that it's not going to be right. I should take that back out just a bit more. Let's put a stroke Let's revisit a nice light yellow, value like 9 warm stroke. Let's just revisit that right up into our center of interest light right up here. Just let that just fall out like that. I like that just to shimmer across a bit, get a bit of movement and stuff, but it definitely says, here's my light, come look at my light. That's where that is. And maybe a little bit more definite right there. Boom. Don't play too much. Leave that little burble of color. It just adds so much. Okay, so we were going back up here to some of our reds. I'll move those around a bit. Maybe some soft ones back in here. Maybe a softer one back out there. Let's put a soft one back out here. See, it just moves some of those colors. It's just pretty, so it doesn't end on the white. It ends over here on the red again. There. And then we need to go to our lighter yellows. Let's take some Hansa, some yellow oxide, some pine green. Let's get some of our white here. Nice greens, yellow greens. Model these up a bit here. And let's just go around visiting some light leaf suggestions through the paintings here. Just quick little jabs of it. He kind of pushed the light, like he'll put I don't want to go that light, maybe cool this just a touch. You know, we're painting more of the roses so we can have a few lighter more oval-shaped leaves than what he does. Because we have the roses. I'll just tone that down a bit. Let's cool that just a bit. A little red violet into that, a little bit more. And a little burnt sienna. And let's just pull a shadow out of that. And see, that helps when you pull the shadow like that, that helps set that leaf underneath there. Let's pull one right out here. Maybe a bit lighter and warmer. There. Maybe pull some of that shadow from the base out. It gets more of his type of look. He does a lot, leaves with a lot of little strokes. Of course, his flowers were painted with a lot of little strokes, so he's keeping that consistent. Mine's a little different, so I'm going to use some wispy, wider strokes of the flat brush. More keeping with my flowers here. And get some of these, put a little red into this, it tones it down a bit. And cool it down just a bit here. Get some of that nice cool color into it. We can darken it back through some of these too. Some of this cooler color looks pretty. Move those colors through. You would still follow like anything the light, but one of the things I noticed about him with that, he doesn't always paint his leaves with the light, like he does his flowers. And so he's kind of like, wow, there's just a light green kind of splashed everywhere. And I do like to kind of go back and lighten some up a little bit in line with the light source, so I get a light and a dark to my greens here. And so it's different. So, this is the thing here. See, you can you do that. We can take inspiration, and you see it on. Yeah, let's do that one. You could see you can take inspiration here, from that and capture a look, but then totally change the thing around, and you got a different painting, and it's totally great to do this, especially as you're learning. And you want to develop your own designs. Now, this one's yours. You're taking the inspiration off of Cauchois. What was it that Pablo Picasso said? we don't, and I don't I don't agree with it, but it's just amazing what he said when I went over his studio over in Paris and stuff. And one of the things they have there on the wall in his studio over in Paris was, artists don't borrow, artists steal. We steal ideas from each other. Well, that's what he believed. And I don't believe in like copy, but yeah, okay, we used his container that he had there, but in his painting, and of course it's in public domain, you can use that. But you use this to keep yourself going and start to develop your idea. Now this little container goes up into your little library up here, and you can pull it back later on with another painting, you see. And this technique does. Here I'll put a little more dark touches around just to kick that contrast just a bit more here. And it's just, and I'll look to see, and I'll look, and that's just, maybe I'll kick this a little bit darker right there, out a bit. He has some light strokes. He has a light, thing here. I mean, it's kind of like, do I like it or not? He has a lot more stems. I mean, and I can drop some stems in, I mean, that's something that I don't do a lot into my painting, but you can there's my habit. I don't want to do that. He drops some of those in, more of a stem, a look to a stem. And do you want to have a stem come out here like that? That is kind of neat. That's not, I'll do my own little thing here, some dark. I'll put just a touch of the light on that here and there. And yeah, that's just, I just don't always like that when he does that, but we'll put a little bit of greenery on there. Just like taking off some of that stem, that side there. Maybe just tone that down a bit. I won't bother by it too much. Put a little dark into that movement there. Just like it's kind of, and if you want to, that's the other thing is like, say, okay, you got that there, and he's like, I really don't know. Then you put your base, some of your base back into your brush here. Let's go just a bit darker. Here, bit of that blue-black here, and some burnt sienna. Okay, let's just put some base back into our brush and paint back into it like that. And soften that out until you see, oh, okay, that doesn't look too bad there like that. That's not too bad. We'll probably just leave something like that, a little bit of something coming out. This mark is a little bit straight. So let's round that up just a bit here, more towards a leaf shape. Maybe put a bit of something there. Maybe put even a bit of highlight on this side here and pull in. Maybe even I like to put little vein lines, so I'll just give it like the little indication of a vein line there. That's what I like to do. Every artist is a little different. I like a few of those around there. That's not too bad with that. And it's kind of an enjoyable little painting there. We should probably take some yellow oxide, maybe a little burnt sienna, model that together, and tap with the corner of our brush some real light, soft little centers there to our flower here. A little heavier over onto these. Just soft little yellows. There. You can brighten that up with a bit of yellow oxide, or if you don't want it to go quite so bright, add just a little bit of white to your, excuse me, I said yellow oxide, Hansa. If you don't want it to go quite that bright, you can just add a little white to your yellow oxide. If you want to go a little brighter, you can use just a little touch of Hansa. And that little touch of Hansa is kind of nice. Why? Because we used it in our centers of our other yellow flowers. And again, if you just touch that around a bit. Not too much because you'll flatten the painting by the same tone, but get some of that around, and that's kind of nice. Now, so we have some of those. we'll take some of these nice reds. Let's follow Cauchois. I like doing his stuff here. We'll add some strikes of some movements here of some of these others colors here around. And let's go just a touch pinky with that, just a touch. Two petals there or so. Let's put some other toned whites, one down there, be kind of nice. Let's get a toned gray white here. It won't show up too much because our table's so light, but we'll put a few of them in there. They'll show up more with the shadow. Here, little touches of them. There, just around a bit. You can even have some of your green leaves like he does. You know, like I said, it just carries some of this color around to little marks of it and stuff there. Like that. That's all the job is, to carry the color around. Let's put a lighter little mark of the pink and stuff on there, onto this one. And again, just kind of curve it a little bit like it's a little petal and stuff, and then it looks great. If you go in there and try to paint one specifically, it looks very stiff. And let's grab a darker burnt sienna, some of your blues and purples and stuff here. Let's just make a draggy little contact shadow color here, touch underneath there. Just touch that around a bit. So you can add, you know, there's other roses and stuff that you have there. And, you know, there's other roses that like I showed you. You go out there and put in roses, or, you know, go out and type into Google Imogen roses, Imogen, and you'll see some different versions of it and stuff. And see if you find one that you like, that you want to add in there. See if that's, you know, it may have a different gaze on it or something that you like, and you know, and see what will work for you into your painting, into your style, and try something. This is the best way, is to try something. Now I just turned around and got that a little bit big, so I'm just going to take a bit of that out, just with my background color here. Paint into that red just a bit. Start taking some of that out. Let some of it even get a little blurry here. And you know, it doesn't hurt anything to get a little lost. But find flowers and start to put them into your shapes, you know, what you want to do into your looks. And that's what we do. That's what we do as artists. And use Cauchois like this. This is your first, you know, thing. Use Cauchois, paint like this. Use Cauchois as basically as your template, you know, and for your ideas, or where do I put this, where do I place my flowers, and what kind of container and stuff like that should I use. But use Cauchois like this, and this will keep you moving forward, so you don't have to do that. But see, when you get all said and done here, I'll step back, move this out here just a bit. When you look at those two there, I mean, they have some of the similarities and stuff, especially in the container. My blues and stuff are there in the container are a little bit heavier than his. My color usage is a little heavier than his. His is these light stroke edges and stuff. I could put in a little bit more light-dark situation into the painting here. That might be better. I can push a little bit more of a shadow overall. I'm pretty light, and I wanted to do that. But I do like some of that darker contrast on that. So I could take some of my blue and some of that burnt sienna and the cooler red violet there. And I could push in right into here, which will create more contrast, especially right up in here in my center of interest, my light source. And this is all stuff you look at towards the end. If you don't like it, paint it back out. That's the beautiful thing about painting like this. Model this up a bit and start to look at, you know, how much of this dark really do you need over there. Now, in doing so, I've done a real kind of a bad thing here, in that I've created kind of a straight line here, so almost a straight line right here. So I'm going to want to put some of these red flowers further back out there and do that. But that's really kind of pretty there. I'll take some of that tone so I don't isolate it here. Let me just straighten that out a bit there too. We'll push that over there just a bit. That looks pretty. It's a little bit more dark. That pops that just a bit more here. We can head right up towards our light right here, soften that up. Let that just soften here, and then I've got to, then I've got to restate and work out some of my greens and stuff out here a little farther so I don't get a line right out here. Let's put another little bit of line, like a leaf or something out here, climbing out a bit. Just the idea of it so I don't get that line. And a little indication of that reddish flower there. There we go. So I don't have quite that line. I developed a line, straight line. That has a straight line right there too. That's the left brain. You know, I'll do that, and even when I'm trying to paint casual, I'll do that. And but this is the time that I try to find it. You know, I try to find, well, what did I just do? You know, and correct it out. But I love to paint like this, and because I can just I love to put that background in and soften those edges. I do that a lot on landscapes and stuff like that now as well. It's one of the ways I love to paint. And I'll pop that rose, that little flower forward just a bit with a touch of dark there. And that works. That works. And you know how much you want to do? Well, that's all up to you. That kind of works for me, okay? So that gives you an idea, all right? That gives you an idea of what to do. And, you know, and if you want to go copy a Cauchois one, exactly, you can do that. But making a few flower replacements, you know, and if you're stuck on exactly how to do a flower, you go back and look through some of my books, look through some of the videos, look through some of the things, look through some of the flowers that we did at the very beginning of these things, some of the lessons, and I showed you some different things. Do flower replacements. See if you can replace, you know, some of those flowers and stuff there. So there's all different kinds of ways to do something like that. I'm going to push this petal out down here just a bit there. There we go. Get a better roundness to that flower. And then I'm going to leave it alone because it comes time where you can do too much to it and you'll lose the casual nature of it. There you go, okay? So look to replacing those flowers and stuff and have a good time with it. Or you can try these, try the Imogens and try this. If you're a younger painter, try this. Try working something like this. And if you want to go out and replace some other flowers and stuff, you can do that. Try it a couple different times. But, you know, look up Cauchois. There's lots of different containers. And like I said, I'm going to put some high-resolution photos and stuff down below. I'll put this photo from this one down below. And you can look right directly at his paintings up close and do some replacements and try some different things and use it as kind of like a template, okay? Alrighty. I'll see you on the next lesson where we're going to go over and paint Franz Mortemans. We're going to paint, he has a different way of painting his style of roses and his real loose edge roses and stuff. They're a little bit more difficult, but we'll give him a try, okay? And see if we can do that, and then paint a painting where I apply it, his kind of technique to what I do today, okay? All right, I'll see you on the next lesson. Have a good time, and again, as always, if you have questions or something like that, hit that contact page and drop me a line, okay? Okay, see you on the next one.